Welcome back to another video. First, originally saw the pictures online of this build. I was on the messenger right away to come and see it, and I think it's only been 3 days since I messaged. So as you can imagine, this is something quite special and something that I want to see up close. This one is definitely a home-built hero car. No fancy workshops, no real fancy tools, just what you classed as a home-built shed at the side of the house. So let's get in and let's show you what this build is all about. As I say, this is just a small area at the side of the house, sheeted with lights and a small garage at the back. So this looks like an Astra Mk4, and it is a genuine SRI turbo, but as far as away from an Astra as you can humanly possibly think. So let's dive in and I'll show you what makes this so special. It is installed with a 2JZ super engine. And as you can imagine, this is the reason why I rushed over to see this build, because it is epic. Not only is it, I'm a Vauxhall fan, everyone has got to appreciate a 2J. So let's get closer and let's see what's gone involved in getting this engine in the Astra Mk4. So as you can see, a 2JZ. Obviously, out the Supras, yes, the purists are going to know this is not a genuine one out of a Supra because they're probably the best part of 10 grand. This is a Lexus engine, which to be fair, it's still a 2JZ. They still make great horsepower and they're still an interesting build in anything. So, to look at the fabrication work that's gone into. Now, bear in mind, Sam who owns this car, he's not a fabricator, he's a general workshop mechanic in a garage. So, and this has been done with no fancy tools, and as you just look down there, a basic Clark welder. So no fancy welders, no fancy cutters, no fancy laser cutting. So we're seeing this in its raw material. It is not finished. All the welds still have to be ground down and cleaned up. But as we know with my channel, I like to see them in this raw finish, so you can see the amount of work that's been involved. But what you can't see is this is running an RX8 subframe. So obviously it brings the rack forward so it can clear the sump area, and you know you've got clearance around here with it being rear wheel drive. So it runs the full subframe, the full bottom arm setups and the full suspension setup. And as you can see, it's all been adapted in this area to take the double wishbone setup. He's then gone on to obviously cut the strut tops, plate them to take the RX8 suspension setup. Massive amounts of work to cut all the bulkhead to get the engine to sit far back enough so it clears at the front, so he can get his radiator pack, his intercooler and his oil cooler. This is a custom radiator off a Supra. Again, I think that's to help with the water pipe direction, so they're all in the same place. He's made his cap fit, so he's going to open this up so it sits a bit better so it goes downwards. But he's trying to make the shell work around everything for the Supra. But as you can see, masses of work and fabrication has gone in to make this fit in this engine bay. But the bonnet closes, and as you'll see, it does look like it sits quite proud, but it does fit perfectly under the bonnet. So when this car will be finished, you will not be able to tell that this has anything special in it. It will look just like a factory Mk4 Astra. Giant gearbox tunnel. Now the gearbox is a 535 BMW gearbox, because technically they're cheap enough and they can take a massive amount of torque. So whatever power he throws at the 2J, this gearbox should be up for the task. Massive exhaust tunnel, and all you can see is all the firewalls been adapted to fit the engine, to sit it far enough back so everything can work around. Again, still taking into consideration all the Astra dash is still going to be factory. So technically, looking in here, when he's done, everything will still kind of look like an Astra Mk4, other than the giant the giant gearbox tunnel. That's the only thing that's going to give it away. And also, speaking to Sam, his dad is an upholstery trimmer for Bentley. So I'm expecting this to fit and finish of the interior to be beautiful, because they're going to mould the carpets in, they're going to put some nice stitching on stuff. He is talking about putting bucket seats in. So I'm guessing they're all going to be really nicely done. So let's jump onto the rear. Again, full RX8 rear diff and subframe fit up. The reason for this is it's all built into one. So it's literally the full setup on the rear. Suspension, trailing arms, you know, brakes, shocks, diff mounts, everything is on this complete subframe. So in essence, all they've had to do, I say all, is cut the floor out, lift it up and mount it in that area. Still an extensive amount of work, but you know, they've got it to work. Custom coilovers, which are obviously RX8 coilovers, so it'll all bolt together and it'll all fit in. Obviously, now, as I said previously, Sam is not a fabricator by trade. He has literally just gone with a gut feeling. Now, we can all say, this is 3mm wall box section. It is overkill. Fully is overkill. Fully agree. But he's worked with what he had available, and he's worked with what he felt would make this strong. So this not only is going to be super strong, it's also it's going to reinforce the shell. So in essence, you wouldn't really need to put a roll cage in because of all this framework. He is going to make a roll cage, but that's in the future, and we will be helping hopefully with getting that task completed. So to come round the rear, everything's been panelled in and boxed in. So everything's going to be neat and tidy in here. Then obviously it'll all be covered and cleaned. So what's left to do is, I think he's still got to panel this section in, but then he's going to make a complete flat area which all unbolts, so it's still serviceable. So if he ever needs to dive in and get some bushes and bolts done, he can get through the flat four. But to look in here, massive amounts of work, and hats off to Sam for jumping into such a massive project, because there's not a lot of people who would jump feet first into this build and do this type of thing. So this is the custom fuel tank he's had made. So this is going to drop down basically in the middle. The prop shaft is going to run in this area, so it's going to drop down on one side here. So he's had the alley tank made so he can have the tank sit under the floor, still have a good sized tank, and still have room to run his exhaust down this side. Time done to have a quick look at what's going on. The BMW gearbox, it's a big old unit, but it can take a lot of power. And as you can see, the amount of cutting that's been involved to get it to fit is quite substantial. It'll all be boxed in, it'll all be reinforced, and it'll all be strengthened. Because if you take anything like the box section in the rear, 3mm box, you know, this is going to be a very, very stiff chassis, very, very strong, and it's going to work. The fabrication on the sides to make the RX8 front subframe fit, it fits really quite well, if I'm honest. And even being honest, when you look at the car and the wheels width, they fit under the arches pretty damn well. Although he has to run, I think, some spacers, because when it's on full lock it does catch in places, but that's a small thing that he's got to modify and adjust. The full rear subframe of the RX8 fits nicely under. Massive appreciation for this build, because to do this on your back in such a small outside area, there's many companies out there who have giant workshops who would not even know where to start with this type of build. So as I was just saying, the fitment of the wheels, let me get a bit further down, towards the arch of the Astra and the RX8 is very, very, very close. So it's not as if the RX8 is massively wider. It's been a really, you know, I would like to say an educated guess that it would fit. It seems to fit the arches really, really well. And what is a big kudos is I class myself as a welder fabricator. It goes to show you don't need super expensive welders, tools to do this type of job. You work with what your budget allows. And for me, this is what I would class as, it's like an entry welding machine, but your world's your oyster. You don't need to have a giant 2,000, 3,000 pound MIG welder. You can get away, and as long as you've got vision, you can make it work. So let's talk about a bit of engine spec. The engine's going to be finally finished at about 500 horsepower. But as we know, these super engines can run anything up to, I think reliably, I've seen one do drag week and do 1,600 horsepower. So we've got a GTX copy turbo, GTX 35, a custom billet inlet manifold. Obviously, the exhaust manifold is a Chinese copy, but again, this has been built on a bit of a budget. It's not money, no object, but the idea is to get the car done on the road and running, and then it can be developed, progressed on, and made better with probably, you know, we all know these Chinese exhaust manifolds will probably last you 6 months and then they'll start cracking. But if it gets the car done and it gets the car running, then in the future, he can make himself a custom exhaust from there onwards, which is going to last. But to get everything in here and prepared so we can run and drive it is definitely a great thing to do, because I think a lot of these builds get stopped where finances start hitting in and they're going, right, well, we need to buy this turbo at £2,000. It's nice to see that you can just get a turbo at, say, £200, £300, £400 to get you started, and then when the project's running and driving, then start upgrading, then start making it reliable and a lot better. I've bolted the bumper on now to give you an idea of what we mean by it's going to look like an Astra Mk4. So on the principle of, when you pull up next to this, at traffic lights, at a drag race, you're automatically going to think that this is just a Z-let. Super interesting build. Really nicely executed. You know, it's going to be an awesome fit and finish to put a 2J in an Astra Mk4. So to tell you how this project came about, so Sam had an original Z-let engine in this. So it was originally a Z-let in the shell. He was racing a car locally, pulled off, the engine gave up. So they had to pull the engine out. So when they were pulling the engine out, the box was dropped first and the full engine just swung length north-south, and obviously the light bulb clicked, and that's where the idea came for the rear-wheel drive Astra Mk4. And then obviously as your mind grows with these projects, then the 2JZ got added on afterwards. But I love it. Anyone who thinks that this is, you know, no use or, you know, it'll never get finished, they're not the type of people who should be watching my channel, because we all love an interesting build which is completely out of this world. Who would have thought you could fit a 2J in an Astra Mk4? So I'm going to sign this one off. As you probably will agree, great build in such a small area, showing that a bit of imagination and some basic tools, you can chase and build these amazing dream cars and these dream builds. We're going to keep on checking on Sam, because he's hoping this one will be done by Christmas and out running and driving for next year. So fingers crossed, there'll be some more content to come in the future, and we'll see how this one gets finished. So we'll sign it off. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.